So yesterday we hit on a flooding event in the UK that broke records dating back to when the country of today's story had declared their independence from that monarchy. Hi, I'm Chris May, writer, producer, and host of This Day in Weather History, a podcast now in its second year from the Weather Network in Canada. Think of this: wind gusts up to 130 kilometers per hour. At the height of a severe storm, more than 90,000 people were reported without power. Hail came in literal dumpings, building up into snow-like piles. This day in weather history. So right now we're going to look back at one of the farthest reaching storms I've ever heard of. Now, it may not have been a hurricane or a typhoon or monsoon or super cyclone, but it did affect a large percentage of the U.S. in one fell swoop and did a ton of damage. Today was day 3 for a storm system that lasted over a week and created severe hail and high wind damage reaching from Minnesota in the north to Texas in the south, and then over off the coast, Virginia all the way up to New York, resulting in damage that was estimated to have been over $2.5 billion. Let's get this started early. What happened? Severe thunderstorms impacted many areas east of the Mississippi River Sunday, June 11th through Monday, the 19th. The Minneapolis metro area suffered an especially heavy toll, receiving hail damage to many buildings and vehicles. A line of severe thunderstorms, known as a bow echo, raced across eastern South Dakota, southern Minnesota, and into Wisconsin with wind gusts of 100 to 130 kilometers per hour. That was on a Sunday. Then on the Monday through the Wednesday of that same week, another weather system swept across the northern plains all the way to the Great Lakes states, and again with several rounds of severe storms to the plains and upper Midwest. With the powerful sustained winds and even more lethal gusts, 2 people were injured when a gust flipped their pickup and camper as the driver was trying to pull over onto the shoulder in Minnesota to stay safe. Welcome to year 2 of this podcast. Right now, you're listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider. But there's also the daily podcast video short. They're shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective. But oftentimes, they will include visuals from that day's event from when it happened in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go check out the podcast video short on television or online anytime at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. I know it sounds like a big budget movie already, but as unbelievable as it appears, there were some truly dramatic images that circulated, with one of the most dramatic being at Monticello High School, which was destroyed by the storm. Power lines were reported down, and the winds also took down trees. It was far-reaching and complete. This was no ordinary storm. This was a complex of systems that were fed by a strong jet and very favorable winds, along with a real juicy Gulf influence. It went straight up the gut of the U.S. and into the Midwest, but swept east, affecting every state along the way, and everyone there from the north to the south inclusive. Here are some of the highlights from the affected areas. Lightning struck a home in Middletown, New York. 2 other houses were reportedly struck by lightning in Chester County, Pennsylvania. In Washington, D.C., strong thunderstorm winds blew a tree into a car. Additionally, a large mudslide was reported across a highway in Vermont. And before it was all done that week, we had a microburst in Kentucky. Flash flooding forced an evacuation of an apartment complex in Trenton, Tennessee. A tornado was reported near Moss Point in southern Mississippi with damage to several buildings. In Nebraska, the wind went wild on the Friday evening. A gust of 180 kilometers per hour was reported near Fremont, and a gust of 170 kilometers per hour was measured in Omaha. And this was on the day before that year's College World Series got underway. This was not a Hollywood big-budget thrill ride. This was a serious, real-life weather event, and one no one would ever forget the events of from this day in weather history. Tomorrow is June the 12th. And for this one, I wanted to look back and explore deeper just what the heck happened that day back in 1986. I was watching my beloved Toronto Blue Jays take on their arch rivals of that time, the Detroit Tigers, when fog took over the exhibition stadium. That's along the shores of Lake Ontario, resulting in the single most bizarre home run I have ever seen in the major leagues. It took a ton of research to figure this one out, but it will be so worth it. Tomorrow, join me on This Day in Weather History with me, your host, Chris May.